I'd like to introduce Jake Tibbles. He has been with the Thousand Islands Land Trust for the past 18 years and has been their executive director since 2012. I personally know that he's an excellent guy because he drinks old fashions with Woodford Reserve. Jake has been at the front lines along with John Peach, protecting Blind Bay and preventing Customs and Border Protection from developing their new facility there. And he is going to wrap up this portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Bear with me 1 second. First off, I could definitely use one of those Woodfords right now, so thank you. It's always a fighter standing in between all the folks at the end of a conference and cocktails and heavy hors d'oeuvres at Minute Anthony. But thank you, Bridget. Truly appreciate all your support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Emma French and the whole team at Save the River. You guys have just done an excellent job keeping up with the media, but also making sure that this issue stays out in front of the river community. There's no question that if we're going to end up moving the needle on this and citing it in a place that is supported by the community, we're going to need everyone's help. It's going to be a big lift. So before I jump in, I wanted to go ahead and just mention a few highlights or high-level items that I think are important. And those issues or items have really grounded us in our thinking on this issue, especially from a strategic standpoint. And number one is, we live in a border community. Tilt, Save the River, the Blind Bay Coalition, we truly understand the importance of border security. By no means, shape, or form are we anti-CBP or trying to work against that important mission. While that issue has provided many frustrations over the course of 3 years, we understand, like I said, the importance of border security. At the same time, we have absolute confidence that there's a path forward where CBP is able to advance their mission at the same point in time, avoiding undermining the ecological, environmental character or residential fabric of the Thousand Islands. Moving forward, our goal is not to endorse any particular site, but to help ensure that the river community's voice is heard and supported, and that a community-supported alternative is considered by CBP. This issue is not a partisan issue. From a political standpoint, Saving Blind Bay has really transcended the political parties. And in order to, again, move the needle, we're going to need the support of each and every one of our political representatives from the local, state, and federal level. All right, so let's dive in. So what's really being proposed? So here's a closer look at the actual facility that's being proposed by Customs and Border Protection. This is at a scale that we really haven't seen outside of the newly constructed Port Authority on Wellesley Island. We're talking about 48,000 square feet of building space, fuel depots, docks, boat ramps, high perimeter fencing, and high intensity LED lighting throughout the facility. Below, these are not exact replicas of what's being proposed, but these do give us examples of what Customs and Border Protection has built recently across the country to support its Border Patrol operation. Circling back to the issues the various issues that, environmental impacts, but also cultural impacts, human impacts that siting a facility like this in Blind Bay could cause. This is one of those that is particularly concerning to many of the residents that live in and around this area. This is actual photo of the recently constructed Port Authority port of entry on Wellesley Island. Talk about impact from night skies. You can see this from a 2 to 3 mile radius. We anticipate that the same would happen if a facility of this scale was built in Blind Bay. So initially in 2022, with the support of County Legislator Phil Reed, the town of Alexandria brought forth what we believed and what the community believed to be a viable alternative, and that was the old Bonnie Castle Rec Center. For many of you who've lived in the area for years, you know that the Bonnie Castle Rec Center has kind of sat abandoned for over a decade. And the initial thinking coming out of the town of Alexandria was, why not use some of the already impacted commercial acreage at Bonnie Castle for the siting of this structure, and coupling it with already existing dock access for Border Patrol at Key Waden. This was in response to the river community's call for Customs and Border Protection to consider alternatives to Blind Bay and other waterfront locations. Unfortunately, in early 2023, CBP decided to pivot. They declined to evaluate the rec center as a viable alternative and really arbitrarily identified a second alternative, basically a runner-up to Blind Bay, and that was dockside cottages. So this image here is an aerial showing the location, the parcel that was being proposed. As you can tell, a highly residential area right across the island you see there, just across the river. That's, thank you, Round Island. Again, a highly residential area. Embedding a 48,000 square foot industrial scale facility quickly was met with pushback from the river community. So this just gives you a good reference of where Blind Bay is. So kind of on the right-hand side, you can see the two parcels owned by the Thousand Islands Land Trust. That makes up the undeveloped land, kind of the ecologically sensitive area of Blind Bay. The dockside cottages property that I had just mentioned is right there across from Round Island in the orange color. And just from a reference point, we're inside the circle at the Harbor Hotel. So finally, 2 years after releasing the draft environmental assessment for the proposed facility, CBP agreed to schedule a formal in-person public hearing as part of the public scoping process. So they had released the initial draft environmental assessment in early 2022. That's when all of this kind of started to roll out into the community. It really wasn't until 2 years later that they actually decided that they should probably interface with the river community, the folks who were going to end up seeing the impacts of this facility. The 2-day meeting was made possible by Senator Schumer's persistence. There's no question that he was able to break the logjam on this issue. As you heard in the video, we were anticipating initially that this was just going to be a comment period where they were just going to accept public comments via email and letter, and then it shifted to where it was just going to be an informational session. It's because of Senator Schumer's persistence that we were able to actually have formal public hearings. The river community was able to gather and voice their opposition to what was being proposed. During the June 25th and 26th meetings, if you were a part of that, thank you. But if you were there, you would have clearly seen that was 800 river residents rallying around an issue that was important to them. And, you know, it was, CBP heard us. It was definitely a voice of no to Blind Bay and to consider alternatives in and around the adjacency to the Cloverleaf. Hold on a sec. So coming out of those public meetings, as I mentioned, for the first time, it seemed as if CBP might consider the community-supported alternative. While it's not the exact location, the circle, yellow circle that you can see there, that's the area that was initially identified by Customs and Border Protection through direct interface with the Thousand Islands the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority. Unfortunately, and to our dismay, a few weeks following those community meetings, those public hearings, CBP instructed the Department of Justice to file a declaration of taking for legal access to Blind Bay. After much back and forth with DOJ and under strong legal advisement from counsel, TILT made the difficult decision to enter into negotiations around terms of right of entry. Shortly after CBP rejected, the area adjacent to the Cloverleaf as a viable alternative, stating the Thousand Islands Bridge presented security concerns. You know, CBP's decision to reject the Cloverleaf was a major hit. There was no question. I would say, you know, after 3 years of dealing with this issue and kind of having it in front and center, not only for our organization, Save the River, the Blind Bay Coalition, all the elected officials, and the river community, this was a major blow to us. This was really the low of the lows dealing with this issue. But it was also a major motivator for TILT, Save the River, and the many organizations and individuals who make up the Blind Bay Coalition. We simply weren't going to accept this decision. On Monday, November 25th, the week of Thanksgiving, Senator Schumer released a formal statement outlining CBP's reversal. You know, while many played a role in this development, we extend our deep appreciation to Senator Schumer, New York State Assemblyman Scott Gray, who's with us this afternoon. Thank you, Scott. And then County Legislator Phil Reed. After 3 long years, this truly was the first time CBP displayed willingness to listen to the river community. So where does this leave us? I would say first, you know, like a weird skin rash, it's not going away anytime soon. That's a definite. I wish there's no one else who would like to see this issue resolved and to see the facility sited in a viable community-supported location, but that's going to be a ways off if we're successful. The big thing by listing the Cloverleaf site, lands owned by the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority, is that in a statement from Troy Miller, who's the acting director of Customs and Border Protection, they are going to be listing it formally in the SEA, which means that they will have to carry out environmental studies, cultural resource studies on that site. That's a really big development for us, the folks who've been working on this directly day in and day out, because that buys us time. In order to complete those studies have to be completed in usually June, July, and August. BAT studies are a part of that. Those need to be completed before mid-August. So it does buy us some time to kind of recollect, build stronger communications with Customs and Border Protection, but also prepare from a legal perspective in case at the end of this, the SEA is released and Blind Bay is still listed as their primary site. This is a list of all of the Blind Bay Coalition members. Definitely want to extend a heartfelt appreciation to all those folks who've rolled up their sleeves, have help us raise and build a legal defense fund. While we have successfully avoided litigation with the Department of Justice, or Customs and Border Protection directly, this has still cost us significantly. Just in having to deal with, legal advice, understanding what our best path forward is, understanding the NEPA process, negotiating rights of entry, all of those things have cost the organization and the coalition. So it wouldn't have been possible without these folks. So I guess I'd go ahead and field some questions at this point. I can't see any of you, I promise. So that's a little better. Yeah. So if you have a question, holler, raise your hand. Oh, couple. Okay. First one, the lady that just stood up.
Are there things that we can be doing right now to help ensure that you and all of the partners are in position to put our best foot forward should we?
I mean, that's a great question. I would say over the last 3 years, you guys have done an excellent job. This is a unique situation. Most issues, Phil Reed would say this time and time again, most issues that he has dealt with, it's usually, down party lines. There's usually people for it, there's against it, neighbors who are disputing with each other. But on this issue, everyone seems to be, in lockstep, moving forward together. And seem to be on the same page. You don't usually see that. We have literally garnered the support of every local and state and federal official, on both sides of the political aisle. That has been a huge part of that, and that's been because of your support in all those letters. We've tried to be careful and strategic on how we deploy the community and your energy and passion for this issue to not cause ourselves more turmoil, right? It needs to be kind of pinpointed when we need to move the needle or to convince our representatives or CBP. So I guess without monologuing too long, I would say stay tuned. You're going to be hearing more from both Bridget and myself here in the coming months, but also Scott Gray, who's been just kind of the tip of the spear on this in the last year. So more will come out, I guess. Yep.
I'll be loud. Dave, I just wanted to say Reverend Phil, Scott, and the other elected leaders, because you guys made it happen, along with the community. And you're absolutely right. Some of these issues, nobody cares about. We don't care about the,
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago, river navigation, I did learn that nobody cares about the politics. We care about the river, and that's the important thing. And I also learned that then, and this is why you're making progress. And there is no daylight between us as a town, Clayton, and these organizations. No daylight whatsoever. The thing that's making it work is because I learned way back then, you never give up and you never give in. And you will get there. So thanks, keep on going.
I am remiss that I didn't mention that also Ken Knapp, who is one of our local dignitaries, sits on the Town of Clayton Town Board, and you have been a vocal spokesperson for citing this reasonably. So thank you, Ken. There was another question up in front of you guys. Okay, yep, right here, Bill. The video really started to put a thumb on that issue, and that is this direct water access. And CBP, they call them operational requirements. And so they take a region, and so we're in the Buffalo sector. North of us is called the Swanton sector. Sometimes those two things get confused in the local media with respect to border crossings and such, but we're in the Buffalo sector. And so, say your question again? Lost track. I was going to... Oh, yeah. So under the Buffalo sector, one of those operational requirements is so to have the immediate water access from the facility. So they were simply just not willing to compromise that aspect. And so Bonnie Castle, as you know, is on the south side of Route 12. And that means that their docks, to be able to deploy their watercrafts, would be on the north side of Route 12. And so they were just not willing to budge on that issue. And they have held the line on that. That's one of the reasons why we conducted research of virtually every Border Patrol station, both in the Buffalo sector and in the Swanton sector, and concluded that this is just an arbitrary desire for Border Patrol on this particular facility. And we've actually used that to kind of help guide our discussions kind of behind the scenes. So yeah, not direct water access. Heather White? Oh.
A suggestion and then a question. Suggestion is, while we're talking to the flyers, every single person, make sure your membership to Tilt and Save the River do not lapse. You've got to equip both organizations to work together. Question. I know I made a small donation to your restricted legal fund.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still accepting donations for that particular restriction?
Thank you, Heather.
So,
I was going to go there on the first question, but I was like, nah, that would have been too strong of a shameless plug. But thank you, Heather, very much. Again, Save the River, Tilt. I mean, we are membership-driven organizations. Our lifeblood is your energy, your time, and your financial resources. We are not doing the work that we're doing without your support in that regards. Yes, we have built a legal defense fund specifically for Blind Bay. We have dedicated those funds in a standalone account. I want to say between cash donations and pledges, the two organizations have raised approximately $250,000, $270,000. It's somewhere in there. And we have utilized quite a bit. We've utilized about $90,000 navigating this issue over 3 years. And we haven't even entered into a lawsuit. Our hope is to do everything in our ability and to deploy other resources to avoid that. But yes, we need support in that way. Any other questions? Okay, I can't see any of them. Oh, yep, Janet? So lastly, before I step off the stage, I just want to personally thank John Peach for everything that he has done, not only for the river community, for Save the River, but also for me individually. Over the last 3 years, I've spent a great deal of time socializing, meeting, having a camera stuck in our face. John has just been incredibly supportive to me as a young professional, really imparting his knowledge, experience, and wisdom down to us, and for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you, John.
I just want to extend my sincere gratitude to everybody that stuck with us and came today. And I want to also really thank every single speaker that came all this way in the snow to speak. Everybody was wonderful. I'm getting only positive comments. But thank you for coming out and learning with us and spending time with us. And we will be here next year, last Saturday of January, unless the world ends. I'm just kidding. Have a wonderful day.